Busy night, busy agenda. I think the mayor is already here. There he is. All right. All right. Welcome, everyone. This is the Berryessa Citizens Advisory Council meeting, and the mayor is here tonight after we have. I'm going into my teacher mode here in a second. You need to be quiet when I'm talking. Thank you. All right. So the mayor will take over the 45 minutes or to an hour he'd like to have. So we'll take our small business part, and then we will have the mayor's budget. All right. So my name is Linda Locke. Welcome tonight, and I am president of the Berryessa Citizens Advisory Council. I'll disperse with the minutes. They were sent out electronically if anybody wants to go to our website. Same with the treasurer's report. You can always look on the BCAC website and look for that information. So we'll disperse with those. We do have representatives from law enforcement, so we'll get started on that tonight. The police report will be first. And I'd like you to give your attention to them, please. And Brett will be up first for the San Jose Police Department.
Thank you, Linda. Good evening, everybody. Hope everybody had a good weekend, good Cinco. Not too many problems. Everybody had a good time, good weekend, nice and a little rainy Saturday, but it was a nice Sunday, right? No rain? Okay, Friday the rain came in, one of the nights. Real quickly, I know there's a lot of stuff to go over on the agenda stuff, so I'll go through my stuff quickly. As far as the climate report goes, I pulled a lot of the stats. It's kind of staying on par with everything that we've kind of seen as time goes on. Motor vehicle thefts continue to still be the #1 problem in this general area, as well as the entire city. So please lock your cars. Please use something to lock a device, like locking up the steering wheel, something of that nature. And please sanitize your vehicles, meaning take out your bags, your purses, anything that could be in there that could potentially make you more of a victim. So please just take everything out of your vehicle in case it does get taken. Now, there only was 11 in the last month, so that is a low number. That's good. That's one of the lowest for this month for this area, but just something, a friendly reminder. There was a few residential burglaries and only one robbery, so that's actually really good. Had nothing to do with anything over here. So I have no major news to report back on any big crime issues as far as that goes. Some hot topics, street racers. I know that's been a huge hot topic over here on the east side, up and down from the south end up here to the north end. I know certain council members have been looking at doing barriers, both permanent and temporary ones, speed bumps. There's different stuff, like Sierra Road does some different things. So those are stuff to talk about with your council members, those kinds of things. We had a lot of complaints about that. Just know that we're in coordination with both our fellow law enforcement partners, the Sheriff's Department, as well as CHP. We coordinate, work together, just like Cinco on a smaller scale. We do work together on Friday and Saturday nights when these things pop off. We help each other. In fact, one thing to note, we just went through San Jose PD. We just did a lot of training this last week that our Air 3 helicopter just put on for all of our patrol folks. So when these people do come in and cause a nuisance in your neighborhoods, we're better at blocking them in and writing tickets, because sometimes people, the only way to learn is to give them a ticket, right? It's kind of like children. You know, you can ask them once, but after a while, you got to give them the old spanking. So, and that's where the tickets come in. And I know we have support from the city as far as holding them accountable. So we're working on that. We know it's a huge issue, and we're going to keep focusing on that. Two small things I still want to cover. The 311 app. There was, I believe I was talking to one of the members in here last time. The 311 app, it's a great app. Please download it. Please look at it. I believe Sharon or somebody I was talking to in here last time. The graffiti out on the sidewalk, I put it in on my phone, took a picture of it, sent it off to the city. They're phenomenal. That gets cleaned up within 24 hours. Sometimes it may take a little bit longer because there's some more requests, but that works phenomenal. So please familiarize yourself with the 311 app, because it covers vehicles, graffiti, dumping, street lights. There's several different things that it actually covers. So please look into that. Last thing is camera registration. I know last time we talked about it in the meeting, or the month before actually, cameras. I'm gonna leave a bunch of flyers up here. There's gonna be a code that you guys can scan on here on your phones. That's gonna give you guys the information on how you can register your cameras. Now, I just wanna throw a disclaimer out there. All you're doing with the police department is saying, hey, my name's Brett, I live at 123 Penitencia Creek, I have security cameras. That's all you're doing. So when we have crimes or we have issues, we know we can come knock on your door and say, hey, can we review your footage for a specific incident? So that's it. I got 20 copies. I'm gonna leave them here with Linda up on the table. Please grab them after the meeting. Please scan them. Please use them. This is a great way to speak to the city without having to actually call somebody or get some other information on that. But this has helped us immensely in the police department as far as our detective bureau and following up on crimes. Lastly, we had shift change. I just want to say thank you to everybody. I know you guys, some familiar faces out here. I will be moving to Central Division, so I'm leaving Foothill Division. So I know I broke the news to Linda, so I will be gone. I'll be downtown, so I'll see some of you guys downtown. But my replacement is better than I am, so he's phenomenal. And this is Lieutenant Tom Muller, and he'll be filling my shoes as far as the East Side commander goes, so I'm Foothill Division.
I'm just saying hi and let you see my face, and I will be here next time, and Brett and I will work together and move this along smoothly. Thank you.
And I'll finish up because I know there's a lot of big things to go out tonight. Does anybody have any quick questions for me before I run and the next speaker comes? Perfect. Thank you so much. Oh, one. Recruiting is going good. I know, in fact, Lieutenant Bowie is a friend of mine. Lieutenant Mike Bowie is in charge of the unit. I know we've focused, they've really narrowed down where we pull the most candidates from, and we're really starting to drive our efforts to those locations and put our money and resources there, which is smart. I know I'm a local person. My family grew up in Santa Clara, Milpitas, some in San Jose. I live in South County. I'm a firm believer that we need to draw or pull applicants from our area, from our family, our friends. Locally is a huge thing for us. I think that's where we get the most people, and then they tend to stay because their family structures here, you know, their support systems here. So we're our biggest advocate. You guys are our biggest advocate. So please, if you guys have any family, friends, neighbors, by all means, direct them to our website, and yeah, we'd love to have them. So we need you guys to help spread the good word. So, yep. Thank you. I will leave these with you. Thank you.
Okay. And from the sheriff, Lieutenant Dennis Owens is here tonight. He's been pretty faithful, but he got busy last month, which is too bad. We don't like to know that they're busy. We want everything safe and sane.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And the reason for my absence had nothing to do in your community, just so you know. It was somewhere else. Happy to report all that right there, not a single report. These are all calls that were generated by us for patrol checks up in your area. So we've been working on our staffing model out of our headquarters division. A lot of our units are we're trying to spend more time in the more rural areas versus answering our calls down here in the city. More often, we're trying to put two-man cars out so we can put them up on the hill for safety reasons. We don't particularly like putting single-person cars up on the hills just because of the response times to go up there. And, you know, it's a little unsafe. So we've been trying to put one two-man car out a night on each shift that we have. We have our 10-plan and our 12-plan shifts. 10-plan works during the week, 12-plan works on the weekends. So on our midnight shifts, we've been trying to put out a two-man car every night to spend more time cruising the hills. And definitely the patrol checks stats have gone up by like 300%. So there's more visibility for us out there. Fortunately, we haven't found anything really bad. That's for you guys, it's good. For us, it's kind of boring, but it's good though. We'll take that. So, your voices have been heard, back at the office, and this is the stuff that I'm sending back to my administration is what I hear from you guys. So please keep the input coming. I greatly appreciate it. This is, we work for you guys. So, if you guys see something that we're definitely not going to see because you have far more eyes than we have. And like I said, the input from you guys is huge, and this is what I take back to my administration and try and put into effect and try and, make your voices heard and then make it seen. So that I am happy to announce, and this is actually 2 months worth. Since I missed last month, I figured I'd bring this month as well. I wanted to touch on one little thing was the Northern Lights. It was a little chaotic, I know. And everybody felt that one on Friday and Saturday night. Last night, people tried, but the fog came down hard last night, so that really kept people off the mountain. But I know Friday and Saturday night, you couldn't go up or down at some point in time, going up Sierra Road or even Mount Hamilton. It was crazy. I know we had people on Swaggart up on the top up there. It was just Calaveras. It was chaos, and nor us or CHP could control it. That's a phenomenon that I can't think of in my lifetime we've seen over here since I've been in the Bay Area for 40 some odd years. And I think everybody else took advantage of it. And, unfortunately it was uncontrolled chaos. And I apologize for that, but at some point in time we were able to get up there and get a lasso around it and then get the traffic flowing again, which actually was a huge help working with CHP. I know there was a couple San Jose patrol cars on the bottom that were helping us just guide people off the mountain onto Berryessa. So that it was a group effort, and once we got a plan together, it really worked out. But if they would have told us that the solar flare was going to come, we could have prepared for this. But unfortunately, we had to kind of jump on the fly on that one. But it was a beautiful sight, I will tell you that. And I'm sure most of you, or hopefully most of you, got to see it because it's not something you see in California. But it was beautiful. But right now things are going great. We appreciate it. One of the things we're going to start pushing is illegal dumping, which was one of the things, the reports that came back to us. As I did not work Friday and Saturday night, but there was a lot of notes from the supervisors about illegal dumping up there. There was some piles of garbage that we turned over to county roads. So please, you guys are our eyes. You can call our non-emergency number at County Com, report the illegal dumping, and they'll usually either send a representative out from county roads, or they'll send one of us up there on a call, and they'll just ask what's the size? Can we get this with a pickup truck? Can we get this with a dump truck? What do we need? We're gonna need a dozer or a backhoe or something to get all this stuff picked up. And we'll give them, our assessment of what we're gonna see, or one of their professionals will go over there and assess it and then take care of the problem. But you guys see people doing it, license plates are great. We can always do follow-up on the back half and go after them on the backside. If you get a report from you guys, if you guys have surveillance footage of it, that's solid right there. I mean, we can definitely work with that. But that's not something we want to see, is the illegal dumping up there. It is beautiful up there. Let's try and keep it that way. And I think as we work together as a group, we can do that. So we're going to make a big push on that next month with our units. They're going to be up in the hills. So I just ask you guys for your help with that. That would be greatly appreciated. If anybody needs the non-emergency phone number, it's on the line. Or at our website, gosheriff.gov. You can pick it off there. You can even leave an anonymous tip if you like, that there's trash up there, and we'll go check it out. But that's right now is all we've got, or I've got, for my department. Any questions real quick? Yes, ma'am.
When you're up there, pretty soon we've got July 4th fireworks time. When you're up there surveying, are you also sending pictures of grass that's too tall?
Yeah.
There it is, up in front of our house, the grass is really tall, and it's an empty lot. So.
When it comes to 4th of July, our efforts are more of trying to keep the ignition sources off there. We'll let the fire department work about their defensible spaces up there in CAL FIRE. But our main priorities, as you've seen in the past, we've just closed the mountain at the bottom of the road here. And we've closed it on the Milpitas side. That way we can just kind of shut it down for the most part. And then we leave a unit, and CHP will have a unit, and we'll just work the rainbow and try and keep people off the mountain. So if we can eliminate the ignition sources from that direct spot, that betters everybody's chances of getting out of that scot-free without any incidents. And that has worked in the past, and I think I was just discussing it in the back of the room, and that'll probably be the same plan that we'll go with this year. And just keeping the people off the mountain, minimizing your ignition sources. The defensible space is up to the homeowners up there. I know county roads will take care of easement when they have that opportunity. I don't want to speak for them on when that's going to be done or if there's any schedules for that. But all we can do for the most part is minimize your ignition sources. All right, anything else? I know you guys have a great guest speaker here tonight, so move on. Thank you guys very much. You have a very safe rest of your month.
Okay, just a couple announcements. Tim Orozco brought cookies tonight, so you can thank him, and we have coffee and water back there. So anytime we get a little thirsty or need a little munching while we're studying the budget, we can go back there and then come back. And our next general meeting is June 10th, and at the Berryessa Library, the director there will be presenting all the kinds of different programs that the library puts on. It's just amazing. So that'll be fun for next month. And I think I'm done now. I'm going to turn it over, and we're right on time. So I'd like to welcome the mayor and our city councilman, David, are both here to answer questions. If you have a question tonight, we'll give you a microphone so that everybody can hear the questions that are being asked. Okay? All right.
Thanks, Linda. Good evening, everyone. I just want to introduce our special guest, the mayor, who's here tonight, and just give a little context about the importance of this conversation. We are 5 weeks away from adopting a city budget. It seems like we were just doing it, but every year it happens. We have to make some tough priority choices this year. For the first time in a while, we have, going into the budget process, a little bit of a structural deficit. Some people, a little bit, I guess, is up for debate, whether it's a little or a lot, but we have a structural deficit that we're trying to fill. We also have some very specific needs that we have to fund. So we're working on solving that problem. I'm happy to be working with the mayor in the Brown Act group that prepared the March budget message that came out at the beginning of March. The city manager's office and budget office did a great job of interpreting that message, coming up with potential solutions that I think has figured out how to make some tough choices, but has helped us preserve most of the programs that we all hold so dear. As I say every year, my primary objective is to continue to fund the key services that all of you expect the city to provide for you, keeping the libraries and parks open and maintained and doing the things we do on a day-to-day basis, but there's also some large priorities regarding homelessness and some of the other things that we also have to spend a lot of money on in the coming couple of years. We're going to make some tough decisions. We have about $1.5 billion in the general fund that we can play with in terms of making adjustments. So a lot of the other funds are enterprise funds that we don't really have as much leverage over. So that of that $1.5 billion, more than half, about $800 million of it, is dedicated to our public safety. So we are working with about half of our general fund budget when it comes to trying to solve a lot of the other problems we're dealing with. The mayor's put together a PowerPoint slide, and he's going to, PowerPoint presentation, he's going to go through and present some overview, and then the most important part of this process is hearing from all of you about your priorities so that as we deliberate in the next few weeks, we know what our communities want us to focus on. So Mayor Mahan.
Thanks, Dave. Awesome. Thank you, Councilor Cohen. Good evening. I tend to pace a little bit while I talk, so maybe I'll take the mic off here. Good evening. How are you all doing? Good. Great to be here with you all. Want to thank Linda, Ty, and all of the board members here. You guys have a very active community association, which is a real blessing. We see a lot of neighborhoods where people aren't as connected, don't know where to go for information, don't know who else they can organize with, and so I'm always impressed when I come up here and just see the turnout and how informed and engaged everybody is. Also want to thank our law enforcement officers. Thank you to SJPD, but also great to see the sheriff here and to see the the collaboration between the different agencies. So I know we're running just a little bit behind schedule, and I do have a slide deck. I'm going to do my best. I'm not going to promise that it's quick, but I'm going to do my best to fly through the content. It may be a little dense, but I think to Councilor Cohen's point, the most important part of this is hearing your questions, your feedback. So I'm just going to jump in and start with, let's see here, where do I point this thing? Back here? That's not working. Uh-oh. Anybody have the, there you go. I can try to do it from memory. I might be able to recite it. Ben, are you able to control it back there? Okay, I'll just say next slide and we'll just do it the old-fashioned way. All right. Okay, so sorry, looks like we're going to be a little cut off on that edge there. This is just kind of where we are in the process. We're just a little past halfway. As Councilor Cohen said, the mayor puts out an initial message in collaboration with some colleagues who get to inform that, goes to the full council for any adjustments and a vote, goes to the city manager. She has the very difficult job of bringing back a detailed, balanced budget, 1,000 pages, I kid you not, of where every dollar goes. And so we just got that last week. It also has to be balanced, very importantly. We are not the federal government. We're not allowed to print money. We can't carry debts over year to year. We have to actually balance it, which means every year we make tough trade-offs with limited dollars. We are now in the midst of study sessions at the council and community town halls like this. We have a vote that I'll put out one more message in June, incorporating additional feedback from the community and the council. We'll have a final discussion and vote in June, and then our new fiscal year starts July 1. Let's go to the next slide. This just gives you the little bubbles here, give you a sense of the magnitude of different departments. You'll notice big investments in public safety, parks, a little bit smaller here, library, housing department, public works. PBCE is planning. When you think about your city, the biggest things we do are public safety and that first responder function. When you call 911, it's typically going to be your city responding. We do basic infrastructure, things like roads and sewers, but also parks and libraries. And then we are primarily responsible for land use. It's also governed by state building codes and other things. But when you go to get a permit or need an inspection, that is typically the city. You don't see schools up here. Anybody know why? That would be, you actually elected this guy previously to represent you on your local school board. So that would be your local elected school board, county board of education, up to the state. You don't see hospitals on here. Where's that? That's the county. Good. The jail, county, most of your health, human services, and the criminal justice system outside of the immediate law enforcement is on the county side. And their budget, they are covering the entire county, but is about twice the size of the cities. We're about half of the county's population. So that's just to give you a little sense. Now on capital, you'd see more in parks and roads and city facilities. We also have special funds that I'm not going to get into tonight. They are fee-based. Our library, wastewater treatment system, energy system, those are based on user fees. So you pay a fee for a service. They are self-contained enterprises essentially, but they are part of the city and we do have oversight over them. And we do make changes occasionally, but they're from budget perspective kind of off on the side a bit. All right, let's get into this a little more context. I always like to just give people the context, and I really don't want it to come across as an excuse in any way. But it is just important to note that on a per capita basis, we tend to have lower revenue than other big cities and then our neighboring cities. We'll get into why in a moment, but our two biggest sources of revenue are property taxes and sales taxes. That was our comparison on property taxes. This is our comparison on sales taxes. And I'm going to ask you why, but the dead giveaway is right here. If you figure out why Cupertino's over there, what do you think? Okay, Apple. So it really comes down, in a post-Prop 13 world, it really comes down to jobs and employers and economic activity outside of just being residential uses. We were built as a relatively suburban bedroom community. We obviously have our denser areas, we have our downtown, but by and large, our land use is biased toward residential. Most of the big job centers and that higher ratio of jobs to housing sits in neighboring towns that benefit from that. So that just means we have to be especially focused, we have to really prioritize, we need to be fiscally responsible. I would also argue we need to be very business friendly and always look to how we can grow economic activity in the city. And we can talk more about that. Let's keep going. Also worth noting, there's good news and bad news here. The bad news is, due to commitments we made to city workers that passed years ago were not properly funded, we do have big unfunded liabilities. And the good news is, well, today that's taking a big bite out of the budget. That's $350 million a year right off the top, 16.5%, that could go to almost doubling the size of our police department or many other services. The good news is, thanks to the reforms that the voters supported and we later negotiated and worked through with our bargaining units, we are on a glide path to having that essentially paid off by the early 2040s. We will start to see more dollars available year over year. We think we're close to that high watermark. It depends on the stock market and other factors, how long people live, but we do believe that we will eventually get that paid off, and we'll have a lot more resources to spend on services. Let's keep going. All that is to say that we also have relatively low staffing levels. We've been working really hard since the Great Recession to just claw our way back up to the staffing levels we had 24 years ago during the dot-com boom. And even that was an understaffed city hall 24 years ago relative to other big cities. We're still not back to where we were. You especially feel that in your police department, where we have a little over 900 street-ready officers, about 1,100 budgeted headcount. We used to be at over 14. We're 1,450 20 years ago. So we've got a ways to go. Let's keep going, Ben. Thank you. So I talk about prioritization and how we can't be everything to everyone. We can't solve every problem all at once. And while we have many responsibilities, we have to have a sequencing, a strategic sequencing that says some things are more important today, but with a hope that they set us up for the kind of growth that will allow us to have a larger tax base and fund those longer library hours and after-school programs and nicer parks and trails and all of the other things that we want. So when we ask the community, and we've asked this 100 different ways, and we hear at the community meetings, we knock on doors, we do polling when we run for office. This is the city's community opinion survey. We have an outside firm, True North, actually do this survey every year and then balance it for demographics. We hear the same things. Address the homelessness issue, specifically the tent encampments and RVs out on our streets. Provide more affordable housing. We also hear, aligned with affordable housing, high cost of living is a major concern, which is typically housing and utilities costs. Crime and public safety, virtually always in the top three. And then cleaning up and beautifying the city. These priority areas, year after year, really should come to the top. And so if we go to the next slide, it hopefully won't surprise you that the budget message that I put forward in March continues to reflect those priorities. And while it's true that we have many other things that we do, I really want us to focus on holding ourselves accountable to measurable improvement in these areas. And now I'm going to go through a few of the things that we did last year I was here. We talked about the budget. I want to talk about a few of the things that we've done and a few of the things we will do. Let's keep going. One other piece of context, though, that's important for you to know is that shortfall that Councilmember Cohen referenced. You know, the actual deficit is just about $5 million. Actually, on a budget of this size, that's very, very modest. I wish it was a surplus, but it's a rounding error almost. But there are a couple other things here that are a big deal. One is we have a number of things that we funded on a one-time basis last year and have done for many years, some of which we really need to protect in the budget. So that's another trade-off we have to make. And then I want to dive a little into this bigger issue with our stormwater permit. Have any of you heard about our stormwater permit issues? I see a bunch of heads nodding. All right, you must read the Mercury News. So there's no way to say this other than that, as we all know, we're essentially in violation of the Clean Water Act. We have a lot of pollution going into the waterways. And while there are certainly bad actors out there in industry or whatever else, we've done an independent analysis, and we know that on the order of 90% of it is coming from the fact that we have people living in areas that are not meant for human habitation. We have thousands of people out on our streets, and probably a couple thousand specifically along the waterways. One of the things that is causing this issue to come to a head, in addition to it just being an environmental crisis, a humanitarian crisis, is that the Regional Water Quality Control Board has just rejected our direct discharge plan 3 times in a row. They're sending a pretty clear signal to us that by the middle of next year, they expect us to be making very significant moves toward getting people away from the waterways and preventing that pollution from going into our waterways. They're not expecting it, as far as we can tell, to just be an overnight flip the switch. That wouldn't be very practical, but they've also told us that what we've been doing isn't sufficient. And look, the bottom line is, it's gonna be hard. We're still working through the plans on how to manage this. It's not gonna be free. It's not gonna be easy. But when we get to the other side of it, I do think we're gonna be better off as a city. This is a forcing function. It's a little bit like the winter is in places like Boston, New York, and Chicago, where they can't allow people to be out freezing to death on the streets. They have to build basic shelter and get people indoors. We're gonna have to push ourselves to be even more pragmatic and create more alternatives to the streets faster and cheaper. I'm gonna go into that in a little more detail here, because we really don't have a choice but to comply with the Clean Water Act. And I think that's the right thing to do ethically for the humanitarian crisis. It's actually the right thing to do in the long run fiscally. It's incredibly impactful on all of our city services to leave people out there on the streets. It's estimated that it costs our emergency rooms and first responders and so forth over $60,000 per person per year to leave people out there. And it's also what we've got to do environmentally. So let's keep going here. On homelessness specifically, a couple of bright points, and then I want to talk about what I think will need to be a little bit different. Last year we did our point in time count, and because of COVID, we did it 2 years in a row, and we actually had a 10% decline year over year. I know it doesn't feel like that. Still have 4,500 people out there. And statewide, the number was actually up about 10%. So we had about a 20-point swing. And I think it's really due to the fact that in recent years, we have seen a number of units move forward, both in terms of the long-term investments we've been making in new affordable units and the more recent investments in modular interim units on government-owned land, where we have 6 communities, 500 units, plus another couple hundred units of converted motel rooms that we're using to just get people out of encampments faster, directly from the streets, stabilized, connected to services. The data is pretty incredible on these interim solutions. We've served over 1,500 people in the last 3 years. 70% remain indoors today. 50% have graduated to permanent housing, and the neighborhoods where we've built a quick build modular community or converted a motel have seen a drop in calls for service for crime and blight, which makes sense. Getting people out of encampments and into a managed environment with case management and basic services, including job training and drug treatment services. So that's been working well. The challenge, of course, is around scalability, which I'll get to in a moment. Let's go to the next slide. Part of what's in this year's budget is finishing this pipeline on the interim units that are faster to stand up and more cost-effective to build and are an immediate alternative to the streets. This is the rest of the pipeline. It's almost 800 more slots, units, individual rooms with a door that lock that are an immediate alternative to an encampment. You see the sites there. They've all been approved by the council. If this budget passes, we've identified the funding to build them. And you see the bed count there. And essentially all 784 units, to be exact, would be open within the next 18 months, we estimate. Let's keep going. To meet our obligations under the Clean Water Act and have our stormwater permit renewed, one of the things that the message, the March message in this budget is trying to do is to move us to faster, cheaper solutions. My basic premise, and in the Q&A we can dig deeper into this if you'd like, is that we need to push ourselves to try to create, and I don't think we can do this alone. I think we need this really to be a statewide strategy. But we need to identify a managed alternative, whether it's a permanent affordable unit, an interim unit, a bed in a congregate shelter, whether public or private or religious or anywhere, a safe parking site, a safe sleeping site, but with rules, with sanitation, with security, with basic management. And as they're available, we need to require that people come out of unmanaged encampments and use them, or find somewhere else that is okay with just camping with no rules. I don't think it should be allowed to simply camp by choice with no rules, but to do that, we have to have a place for people to go. Otherwise, what we do is we literally send people a few blocks away, and then they just come right back when that neighborhood gets angry. And we spend a lot of your tax dollars chasing people around the city. So I just kind of highlighted those. I'm gonna leave it for the Q&A to get into some of those. I will highlight on prevention. That has been a success story. We had some federal dollars to do this that helped us do it at greater scale during the pandemic, but we've been using short-term cash assistance targeted at households that are on the brink of homelessness to get them stabilized, help them get to something more permanent, either higher income or lower cost rent or moving in with family. We have kept 7,000 households stably housed. Average subsidy has been about $7,000 and has been short term. And when we track people a couple of years later, we're finding that they're not ending up on the streets. So there's a category of people, at least in our community, where it's a job loss, it's a divorce, it's a healthcare issue, where if we can stabilize them for 6 months or so, they can typically remain out of homelessness, which actually not only is more humane, but more cost effective. All right, let's keep going. Also talk a bit about and have some dollars in this budget to start doing more to preserve our progress. I think it's really important when we spend millions of your tax dollars building basic shelter, moving people into it, clearing, decommissioning and cleaning up an area, that we don't just allow it to get re-encamped. Now, we can't preserve our progress everywhere all at once, but we want to start prioritizing areas, particularly along the waterways, where we are methodically moving along, standing up shelter, getting people out of the waterways, posting no camping signs, and enforcing it immediately and setting that expectation so that we start to constrain the space that we're trying to manage. Because there's a lot of space out there that is just continually getting re-encamped. That's an example of the first no return zone that we stood up last year with support from the city attorney and our police chief. Let's keep going. Similarly, as long as we have folks living out there, we've got to hold everybody to a higher standard, whether they're housed or unhoused. And so this is about having a code of conduct or a good neighbor policy that we explicitly codify related to trash accumulation, fire risk, the size of an encampment, belongings outside of a vehicle, and start holding folks accountable. Now, we need to empower them. We should give them the trash bags, but tell them where to put it and where to maintain their trash so we pick it up every week. There has to be shared responsibility for our public spaces, and I don't think we've done enough here. It's not going to be perfect overnight. This is a heavy lift. 4,500 people out there, city of over 180 square miles, and a very thinly staffed city departments, right? But we need to do more in this area. So those are the big concepts. Let's keep going, Ben. Driving this section on homelessness. We can go into a lot more detail on any of those. These other sections are a little shorter, but let's dive into housing. One of the big concerns we've heard from folks is, as we focus on immediate solutions to homelessness and better managing encampments, are we just gonna take all the money out of affordable housing and say, forget it? Well, no, we're doing both. This budget continues to do both. To look back, your Measure E dollars have already been invested in over 1,500 units of affordable housing. Last year, we secured funding for a few hundred more. My biggest critique has been these projects are too slow and too expensive to build, and we need to bend the cost curve, cost of construction, but we are going to continue to invest in affordable housing. If we go to the next one here, this budget puts, depending on how much revenue comes in from the state and the federal government, $22 to $40 million into new affordable housing this calendar year. This coming fiscal year. We also talk a bit in there about areas where we believe we can further streamline the permitting process, because time is money and we need to get to yes faster where it makes sense to build housing. And we put in there some fee pauses where we're not continuing to increase fees every year because these projects are far too often not penciling, and our fees can be part of the problem. Our fees can be $20,000 to $80,000 a unit in many cases. And so that's part of the reason we're not getting the housing that we need, even in the places where we want it. Let's keep going. On public safety, there was a good question earlier about police staffing. We had seen a 5-year decline of 80% in applications for our police academies. From 10,000 applicants a year to 2,000, we are now starting to see that turn around. As we project out, the next couple of academies are larger than the last few years. And so that's a really good sign. This budget continues that higher level of investment in local outreach and marketing to our community, to be out, to have our officers out on college campuses doing all that great recruiting work. We also last year stood up about half of the automatic license plate reader network that we have been building. It will ultimately be 500 license plate readers. Before you throw tomatoes at me, it does not have facial recognition. It's not video. It is a still shot of a license plate, which by the way is already public facing, at an intersection, and we delete it if it's not being used in an investigation, and even if it is, we delete all of them within 12 months. Just this year, we're on track to recovering $3 million worth of your stolen vehicles because of this network. Last year, we recovered over $2 million worth of stolen vehicles. We also were able to use this network to facilitate investigations that led to prosecutions related to kidnapping, home invasion, smash and grab robberies. So we want to use technology to supplement our thin staffing, but of course we want to do it in a way that protects your privacy and is very thoughtful about how we're using it. Let's keep going. So I mentioned we'll continue with recruitment of officers. One thing I did not note is the speed safety pilot. We are one of 6 cities in the state. Most other states allow this. San Jose will be one of the first 6 cities in the state to be able to pilot automatic speeding enforcement around schools and in what we call our Vision Zero corridors, where we have a very high frequency of accidents and fatalities. What these cameras do is, and again, they're in use in almost every other state and they're very effective. If you are going more than 10 miles over the speed limit, where one of these is deployed, say right in front of a school, for the first 6 months they're deployed, you just get a warning in the mail. After that, you get your speeding ticket automatically issued without there having to be an officer there to pull you over and issue the ticket. It's a way of creating behavior change. We can't just expect behavior to change through education. We also have to do some enforcement. And then paid cadet program is about police recruitment as well. But I want to keep moving because we're almost done. I want to get to your questions. Cleaning up the city, I want to thank many of you in this room have come out to one of our cleanups. We've done a ton of community cleanups through my office, through the council offices, often in collaboration. Last year, we actually increased the individual number of residents who came out to a cleanup or a dumpster day or a tree planting by 300%. It was an amazing rebound from the pandemic, really great turnout. We want to keep that going. Collectively, along with our Beautify SJ team, we in San Jose took 10 million pounds of trash almost off our roads, cleared almost 2 million square feet of graffiti, and our city teams responded to over 300,000 calls. If you haven't used 311 recently, I would recommend you check it out. We have it in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, I believe Mandarin now as well, and we're constantly improving on the functionality. If we go to the next slide, Ben, just looking forward a little bit, we'll be doing more around abandoned vehicles and actually RV management, which is not always abandoned, obviously. We are continuing to enhance our 311 app and that response on the back end. Some of those services are phenomenal. You report a pothole and it'll be filled typically within 72 hours. Others, like abandoned vehicles, we're redesigning how we approach them to get it routed to the right department and make sure we're properly classifying and responding to it. Finally, on illegal dumping and graffiti, I made the point in the March message that, similar to speeding, we're going to have to invest a bit more in enforcement. We have seen our costs for addressing graffiti and illegal dumping going up about 15 to 20% year over year in recent years. That's way faster than our revenue grows. Our revenue maybe grows 5% a year on average. So we're going to have to get upstream of that and do more enforcement. on graffiti, it's not a huge number of people. It's a very small number of prolific taggers. If a few of them are held accountable, I think it will send a message that San Jose is just not a place to spray the freeway signs, right? Okay, let's keep going. We're pretty much wrapping up here. On attracting investment, we're trying to really tailor strategies around our downtown and key commercial districts because they play a disproportionate role in contributing to the tax base. So we've started to expand. I'd love to do more of this, but walking patrols later this year, our community service officers will start doing bike patrols in downtown. We're starting to use our field training program for our officers when they're in their first year in those commercial districts more frequently, trying to show a little more police presence so people feel safe, so they want to patronize businesses in San Jose, so we generate that, well, one, so you can enjoy your city, but also so we generate the tax revenue that we use to fund all of the services in our neighborhoods. We have launched last year a empty storefront grant where we are making one-time investments in entrepreneurs who want to pop up a business and with low overhead costs, low barriers to entry, test a new business for 6 to 12 months and see if they can get enough revenue going that they can actually sign a lease longer term and have a viable business. So we're trying to get new businesses started to fill those storefronts. And for the first time, hired a truly dedicated downtown manager who actually thinks about downtown full-time every single day. Looking forward, I've been talking a lot about AI investments. I think on our side at the city, they may be more likely to be in institutions like the Tech or our shared library with San Jose State. But in general, we're also trying to recruit incubators and accelerators to San Jose and support our larger companies. I'm very proud of the fact that we have more in our metro area, more patents per capita, including more AI patents per capita than any other metro area. But we've always been a place that's looked forward and stayed ahead of that change so that we can be the center of innovation and all that job growth. And I want to make sure we stay there. We're also preparing for 2026. If you didn't know, it's going to be a big year for our city. We'll have the Super Bowl at Levi's Stadium. World Cup will come with 6 matches, and we'll have a couple of March Madness matches here. And it's really important that we get ahead of this. Councilmember Davis and I are working on this a bit with city staff, making sure we're laying the groundwork to get more of the fan experience here. Last time when the Super Bowl was here 10 years ago, all the fan experiences were in San Francisco, and they got 70% of the tax revenue. We want the hotel rooms and and it's a battle. San Francisco has that beautiful bridge that they always want in the backdrop, but we're going to fight to do more programming, be more intentional. In fact, our team's already working with our airport to coordinate a marketing campaign, Stay in San Jose, that would explain how convenient it is to stay here if you're going to the game. And then some other strategies around more programming downtown. Convention Center is coming back. We hosted NVIDIA's world-leading GTC, the world's leading AI conference. Makes a big difference when we fill all those hotel rooms. That's a lot of revenue into our general fund that we can use to pay for more services. So I think we're about at the end. And yeah, you can get follow-up. If you're not already on our newsletter, that QR code would allow you to sign up for that. Ben, we can also go back, leave that up for a minute, and then maybe we can go back to that slide on the priorities, the five in the budget. Yeah, oh. No, sorry. Yeah, keep going, my bad. Yeah, there we go. Maybe we'll leave that as the backdrop for now. Okay, so I know I just threw a ton at you. That barely scratches the surface of what's in the budget, but it's some highlights on the areas that you've told us in the past are your top priorities. So let me pause there and we'll move to your questions. And I'll let Stephen pick hands here.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Mayor. You mentioned that the state has allowed us to pilot speed cameras. I've noticed that another issue related to vehicles on the road is very, very high noise. Some people have vehicles that are modified intentionally to produce more noise because I guess they hate everybody. Are there any plans or have you considered sound cameras like are in other cities that will automatically find people when they produce too much noise from a vehicle?
Yeah, I love the suggestion, and it is a major nuisance and quality of life issue. We're a little farther behind on the noise piece. I think it's a great note for our team to do some more research, and maybe we can get some more information from you, look at what other cities are doing. We've been very focused on physical safety, those Vision Zero corridors, and trying to reduce crashes and injuries, and some of the more in sideshows, as was mentioned earlier, some of the more serious street crimes out on our streets. But noise is another factor, and if there's good technology that could be paired with an ALPR, for example, that might be worth looking at. So definitely open to learning more on that.
Thank you, and thank you, Mayor Mahan. Good seeing you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. I am actually asking you as a Berryessa school board member and as a lifelong member of the Berryessa community. So I noticed that American Rescue Plan funding is up this upcoming year, and there are one-time funds from the American Rescue Plan that are going to be eaten up. And so I wanted to ask you, is there going to be a plan to address the one-time funding for the Child and Youth Master Plan and also for the digital equity pieces that are being funded by the one-time funding? Is that going to be included in next year's budget?
Yeah, good question. So there's kind of a double whammy here on your question. So one is there was a level of spending we could sustain with the American Rescue Plan and all those federal dollars that were really nice at the time, but frankly are not sustainable. We also ran up the national deficit to send that money down to the locals. That level of funding simply isn't there, is unlikely to be there. One of the things we are doing, I want to get to your digital inclusion comment as well, on the expanded after-school programs and other investments in our youth that we were able to make with those one-time federal dollars. We've taken a slightly different approach that we hope is more sustainable going forward, which is to have a framework that tries to get every possible partner engaged in a way that ensures that we're leveraging each other's strengths and we're not duplicating our efforts. And that is what you referenced, our Children and Youth Master Plan. So what this essentially is a child-centric framework that starts essentially from birth to adulthood and looks at developmentally what that child needs and what the public sector provides through different stakeholders and agencies. So we are one small piece of that with the assets we have. We're an important piece with our libraries, community centers, and rec programs, and parks, and all the rest. But we, of course, so much of that is our school systems, as I mentioned, totally different body. The state spends about $100 billion a year on the K through 12 and community college system. Our county has a major role to play in supporting our youth, particularly our at-risk youth, and especially around health, for example. So what we've done with help from the Sobrato Foundation is put together a pretty comprehensive framework. The council just approved it. It has different verticals like education and health and physical activity, and really looks at where we can best supplement. We're hoping to use this to better coordinate our investments with the county and the school districts and other entities, but also to go out and raise money from philanthropists and private funding. If we find, hey, there's a real gap around something I've become very interested in, which is actually I was as a teacher, but third grade reading levels, for example. Mississippi just made a 10-year push to get every third grader on reading level by the end of third grade. We could use that framework to figure out who's able to do which investments and how to fill gaps for the kids who don't have access to the one-on-one tutoring or the summer programming they need. But the reality is, where you started, we don't have the kind of funding we did a few years ago, and without a major increase in taxes, that level of funding really is not realistic. But we do want to make sure there's no redundancies. We're really well coordinated. We're focusing on the kids who need it most, and we're motivating philanthropy to come in and invest as much in a targeted way as possible where it has the biggest impact. On the digital front, I said it was a double whammy. We've also found out that the federal government is really pulling back funding for connectivity. And so we are in conversations with the telecom companies, the big providers of the big network providers, around going forward as they map out their infrastructure needs. We're going to need to change the way that we have been essentially pricing and billing them to capture some of that value to make sure we can invest it in connectivity for the rest of the community. I think we'll have to do that in partnership with the private sector because, again, we don't have some big separate pot of money. We've done a lot to close the digital divide in San Jose, particularly through our library system and in partnership with the school districts, but we're cognizant of the fact that there are still a lot of low-income families who are not connected or, as the federal government pulls back, may lose their access to broadband. So I'm aware of it. It's not an area where we can just single-handedly go solve it as your city right now. Appreciate the questions. See a bunch more hands over here. All right. Hi there.
First, excuse me, I have a comment and then a question. My comment is, I think you're doing a fantastic job with promoting businesses coming. I think it was the University of Toronto that said that San Jose had a 28% increase in visitors as measured by the cell phone connectivity.
That was for downtown, but you're absolutely right. We saw a 28% year-over-year increase in downtown visitors last year.
Yeah, so I think that's fantastic. And then my question is, of course, you have read all of the information about the billions that have been spent on homelessness, but the fact that they can't necessarily track where that money's going. And I think some of it's with services, and I believe even within this area, Salvation Army got like $300 and some thousand to serve the homeless population, but because they have a requirement, you can't use drugs, they ended up serving one person. So what's being done to make sure the services are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing and helping our homeless population?
Great question. Thank you. Yes, that is a personal passion point as well. We just had a conversation about some HUD funding that will go to various nonprofits related to housing and homelessness services. And I was making these very points from the dais. I'm pretty sure I heard Councilor Cohen making similar points around just being very clear about the expected outcome, how we measure success, and having very clear metrics. One thing that's a bit of good news that was actually already in progress prior to the recent state audit was that in San Jose, we recognizing this issue, and I've been part of council conversations in the last couple of years around this very point of ROI and how do we measure success and how do we hold our third-party nonprofit partners accountable to using these dollars effectively, and when the dollars aren't used effectively, learn and do something differently. I think that's at least what the community expects, is that when things don't go perfectly, that we learn from it and show you what we're doing differently. Because of all of that, we do have a more comprehensive report coming back to the council in the fall that is meant to give us that broader view of looking back and saying, here are the dollars we spent, here are the strategies, here's how they were spent and where they've gone. We typically know where the dollars, we know where the dollars are going. I think what's tricky is we don't always have great reporting around the outcomes, or the outcome may be an intermediate outcome, such as, an outreach worker went out and contacted someone and got them into the county's system for managing homelessness. But as I think I just said at this council meeting, it's kind of like, well, so what? That's just one step on the road to what? The outcomes we care about are harder outcomes of getting housing, getting a job, enrolling in and completing a drug treatment program, staying off the streets. Those are the kinds of outcomes we care the most about. We have so many different service providers tackling so many different pieces of this that we often get these very incremental metrics around things like outreach or signups, and we don't always track that person all the way through. Now, the county does have an information system that should allow us to do it, but we've made very clear with city staff that we want to see that much more clearly mapped and reported and following through to the outcomes we actually care about, rather than just telling us how much outreach is happening, for example. I think it's really important that as we tackle this Clean Water Act issue, that we're actually measuring the number of people we get out of the waterways and the re-encampment that we prevent, and that we actually get to eventually eliminating pollution from going to the waterways. That's an objective measure. We can know whether or not that's happening. We actually have independent teams go out and measure the water quality and the pollution going into the waterway. That's an objective measure that needs to be shown publicly and reported over time, and we need to all be able to track that reduction as we take actions to make it happen. So that's why I've talked a lot about dashboards. They can get very complicated, but I really want to see those big goals of how many people are out there, how much pollution's going into the waterways, and then what are the things we're doing, like building basic shelter, see those kind of all arranged visually in a way that makes it easier for you to understand where your dollars are going. So I think we can do a better job. I do think by the fall, and maybe I can come back, or we can have our city team come back and give you an update when they bring forward that homelessness report and actually break down for you how we've been spending our dollars in San Jose and what impact we've gotten for it.
Hi. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay, so as a former librarian for the city of San Jose, the first thing I wanted to say was that I do not support the cuts to the Partners in Reading and the Makerspace Steamship, Makerspace STEAM programs, but these are things that really can improve people's lives. The other thing is that I strongly object to moving Measure E funds from temporary solutions, from the permanent affordable housing solutions to temporary solutions. I think that this is not what people voted for. The Housing Commission has rejected that on a 6-2 vote. And I think that there's like, I think 70,000 rent-impacted families in the city of San Jose. And the only way to really deal with homelessness is with permanent solutions. And I don't think we should be diverting money, Measure E money, from building affordable housing to temporary solutions.
Well, thanks for the comment. I'm happy to respond a little bit. This budget continues to do both, and I think it is important that we do both. But I think we have to be honest about the numbers. Even at a rate of billions of dollars going into affordable housing, while each unit is very meaningful and it helps a person, a family, it makes a big difference for the people who get access to it. As long as it has been our primary approach to ending unsheltered homelessness, it has really not shown, actually just the Manhattan Institute just had a whole study on this, it ends, permanent affordable housing works in that it ends homelessness for that person on a per individual basis. It has not yet in any market really shown to end homelessness on a population basis. And we will need some faster, more cost-effective, really more scalable solutions. At the current rate, we're seeing people fall into homelessness faster than we're able to build the permanent units. And so cities that have significantly lower unsheltered homelessness rates, even with the same rate of actual housing insecurity and economic insecurity, tend to be places that have more rungs on the ladder, that have more basic shelter, more interim shelter. And I get it, nobody thinks congregate shelters are great. Nobody thinks a safe sleeping or safe parking site is great. I think in an imperfect world, though, we have to really be honest about the math. And when you have 4,500 people out there, we have to turn that dial. And it's how many units of permanent affordable do we get each year on a sliding scale of 100 to maybe 400 or 500 a year, basically, at best has been what we've seen, even with massive infusions of capital, versus can we move significantly more people into something basic and dignified with sanitation, with some basic safety, with access to a case manager. And look, it's a tough trade-off to make, but I'm for more lower rungs on the ladder that can get people stabilized, connected to basic sanitation in a safe site, can end the crisis of suffering and crime and trash on our streets, get people stabilized. And it's not perfect. I don't love the idea of just getting everybody into a shelter, but I can tell you, even in that world, even though that's not our ultimate goal, and we are continuing to invest in affordable housing, even if everybody was just in a shelter, they and we would all be so much better off than the immense suffering on the streets today. The crime, the violence, the sexual assault, the theft, the fires, the trash. So it's just, unfortunately, we have constrained resources. We have a crisis at immense scale, and we're balancing imperfect options here. But I'm for getting people stabilized into something more dignified today, and actually our mandates under the Clean Water Act are going to force us to move in that direction. But I appreciate the feedback. I don't love it either.
Yeah, good evening. Mike Kraus here. One of the questions I have is we're focused on the homeless encampments that are happening along the Penitencia Creek venue there. And I know that homeless is way at the top of your priorities, but I was going to ask you, do you specifically allocate budget towards a particular stream, Penitencia versus Guadalupe versus these other encampment areas? Because every time we work to try and get an attention to an issue with homelessness, You go to the Valley Water people, you go to the city of San Jose, you go to the county, and there's a deflection sometimes of accountability there that it is very, very frustrating to us as a community to try and address the issue of homelessness. So I just ask you to just fund everything for Penitencia Creek.
All right, thanks, Mike. Let me, before I make a promise I can't keep, let me try to react to that though quickly, because I appreciate your point about the jurisdictional issues. Coordination is a big challenge, and I think part of our job as leaders is to get everybody to the table, get coordinated, and stop the finger pointing, and actually move forward and have everybody have some skin in the game and do something. So I'm very happy my staff is working with your council member to just make sure we're facilitating a conversation with county and Valley Water. I'm doing the exact same thing with council members Davis and Torres down in districts 3 and 6 on their border at Willow and the Long. I was on the phone with Dick the other night talking about that site. It's mostly Valley Water land that's impacted, and we're on weekly calls with Valley Water about the site, with the council office, with Valley Water. We certainly want to get the county to the table where appropriate. Sounds like it is at Penitencia Creek. And just remove all the excuses. Be clear of, who owns what, who's responsible for what. Now, that being said, the reason I said I don't want to make a bunch of promises I can't keep is that at the scale of the problem, 4,500 people, and all the demands we've got, including the demand to continue to fund affordable housing, police and fire, all those paving the roads, all those other things, we're not going to be able to just move 5,000 people overnight into a shelter. We have waiting lists, hundreds of people long for our shelters. They're at capacity. I mean, one of the things about California, one of the reasons you see the crisis is we don't have a lot of shelter beds compared to East Coast cities. Tons of shelter beds because it's cold. We don't have those shelter beds. So this is going to take a little bit of time. We are going to be focused largely along the waterways because of the stormwater permit, the Clean Water Act issues. We will have to focus first where the Regional Water Quality Control Board tells us that it's not the whole 140 miles of waterways in the city. It's a subset of them that have been particularly impacted over the years that they're focused on. I don't know if Penitencia Creek is in there or not. It is not part of that zone. You do have, and I will say Councilor Cohen has been a real leader on this because, I'm just going to be honest. A lot of elected officials talk a big game on homelessness, but the moment it comes to a real solution, they run the other way and blame somebody else to the point you're making. Councilor Cohen, and I'm sure it didn't make him the most popular guy at the holiday parties last year, but he championed both a safe parking site for RVs and an interim site up at the Cerrone by the VTA rail yard. Those are going to, when they come online, create hundreds of new places where people can go, and I know he's going to be your advocate. Again, I'm not setting him up. He's not that he can wave a magic wand here, but he's going to be an advocate, and I'll fully support him in making sure that the majority of the impact of getting people off the streets, out of tents and cars, and into Cerrone and the safe parking site are folks in District 4, because you all are taking on part of the solution. And if a district is willing to take on part of the solution to homelessness, you should see most of the benefit. I've said that from the beginning. So I appreciate your point. We'll absolutely sit down with you. We'll get the other jurisdictions to the table. We'll figure out what we each can do. And as those sites come online, D4 is going to get more people off the street because those sites are opening up. I'm going to let, if Councilman Cohen wants to add to that, I'll turn the mic over to him.
The easy question. No, the answer to this question is sort of piggybacks on all the other questions that have been asked about the balance of how we spend our money on affordable housing versus interim housing versus prevention. And by the way, prevention has to be an important tier in that. And back to the measurement question, how do we measure where the dollars are going and how effective they are? I mean, ultimately, a 10% reduction is a great outcome, and actually that's the outcome people want, is a reduction of people that are homeless. That's a great measure. But the flip side is, we also need to be touting our successes on the number of people that we're putting through interim housing sites, that we're putting into affordable housing. Thousands of people over the last 5 years have gone into those, unfortunately, as more people become homeless. And so it's really hard to create a single measure of what is success with the dollars. Those are just sort of kind of background to the question. The challenge, of course, is the size of the city, the scope of the problem. I'm focused on the neighborhoods in our district that are impacted, and I certainly am aware of all the ones that are impacted. We hear about them. One thing we know is impractical is spending a lot of money moving somebody if they're just going to move down the creek to another spot. And that's really why it takes a little bit of time to be smart about it and do it well. So while it's frustrating, because, and as I tell everybody, the only site that matters to you is the one near your home. I understand that. We have a team of people who we meet with, and by the way, I called an emergency meeting of all of the homeless people in the city just a week ago to say, hey, District 4 has a problem now, and it's exactly, the mayor will remember, I predicted this problem because as we've stood up sites in other parts of the city where we don't yet have one in District 4, we've made a commitment to no return in those areas. And I said, if we do that, we're just going to see them come to our area. And that's what's happening right now. And I am aware of it and I'm frustrated by it, as you all are. But I also know that if we just say we're going to go in and move people, that they're just going to move down the way. And we've had that happen in a few places. We've actually done a no return along Coyote Creek near the flea market in North. That area has remained clear for a year and a half since we cleared it. It's really important and it's great, but I also cautioned that when we did that, the folks were going to move along Penitentiary Creek, and that's what they've done. So we have to do it in a smart way, and that's what I'm focused on doing. I will also point out that while it's clearly not an acceptable situation in any neighborhood in District 4, I also then hear from District 9 where there's a site with 150 people living along the creek there, and I sit here and as I push the housing team and the homeless services department to go out and deal with a 10-person encampment in Berryessa on Penitentiary Creek, it's really, really difficult when there's the larger ones in other parts of the city. So I just want to make sure everyone understands the scope of what we're dealing with, the challenges that we're dealing with, but the focus continues to be there. I have a follow-up meeting this week. We're going to be coming out to some of these sites and cleaning them up, but we have to have a smart approach to it. I don't really care about jurisdiction. I always make sure that we work collectively to solve the problem. I won't deflect and say, hey, it's their fault, but I will tell you the bigger challenges, which are really about how we can deploy our resources in a cost-effective manner across the city, and be honest with you about the time it will take. That's why I've also been frustrated at how long it takes to build these sites. And I will say the challenge on the Measure E, and the big debate this year is on how does money get spent on interim versus long-term. The city has over and over again voted, the council has unanimously voted over and over again to add more locations so we can deal with this problem without ever understanding really how we're going to fund them. So we are now having to address the fact that we have not adequately funded some of these solutions that all of us on council and all of the residents want in a way that hopefully for a couple years of investment will allow us to build up a capacity that will then bring us back to a status quo, steady state, and allow us to put more of the resources into Measure E, and that's the challenge we face right now. But we also, I do want to say, I think that was left out of this, our city management has done a great job in going out and finding some grants and alternative things to backfill the movement of Measure E money. So assuming that they come in, which obviously is still not 100% certain, about 80% of what we had last year on affordable housing will still be spent this year on affordable housing. But we have to use some money also to solve the problems and build the sites that we've promised the community we would build.
Yeah, well said. And I apologize, I'm supposed to be jumping on a call right now. It's already 8:15. If there is one last pressing question, Stephen, you're welcome to, we can wrap up with one, or we can.
Right over here, and that if there are any more questions, you can always, I'll have this start, so you can contact me, I can
And you can reach me at mayor@sanjoseca.gov, and I'm also always happy to come back out. You guys meet monthly, as I understand it. Is that right? Okay. Happy to make a return trip in the fall if you'd like, if not sooner. Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Hi.
Name is Marcos Espinoza, president of Alviso in Action, and also president of Alviso Community Political Action Committee. With the deficits in park funding, my community actually holds $1 million for our community park. We've been reaching out to the city, our council member, for multiple years. Mr. Santos could also testify to that, demanding some action be taken at our park with the funding that we actually have. Can I get your commitment tonight to help solve this issue?
I appreciate the question. That's one I'm going to have to follow up offline with you to learn more. That's a very specific issue. I don't know that I know the history or exactly what you're talking about, but I'm happy to get more information through my staff and we can figure out, and I'll be sure to call Mr. Santos and happy to talk to you, and we'll figure out if we can help you with it. Certainly. Thank you. Okay. I apologize. I am late to a call. I was supposed to only stay till 8, but I don't want to prematurely cut things off. I hope this gave you a sense of where we're going. And again, mayor@sanjoseca.gov is one way to reach me. We're also pretty active on social media. Our newsletter is a great source of information, and you can even hit reply, and that comes to our team as well. Really appreciate how engaged you all are. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Okay, that was a lot of information. We have to think about it overnight and try to think of the questions we didn't get answered yet. So be sure to contact them because they'll be available now. There'll be some people available. We have about 10 more minutes before we're going to be getting kicked out of here. So there's cookies, there's water, there's coffee. Help yourselves, talk. Some of the mayor's staff are still here. Your council person is still here, so go ahead and talk to them. And thank you all for coming tonight. We appreciate it. It was a nice, good crowd. Thanks. Good night.